Hey everyone, Beth here. This week we're bringing back our very first episode of At the Iowa Farm Table, and we think it's worth a replay. Schools are back in session, and this episode is all about school lunch and how it connects with farmers, kids' health, and Iowa's economy. But I did want to point out that at the end of the episode, I talk about a bill that was in the Iowa legislature, HF 851, and its Senate counterpart, SF 525. The House passed that bill in 2025, but the Senate did not yet, and it can come up again this next session in 2026. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has also indicated that it's looking for what they're calling laboratories of innovation to serve as policy incubators. This could mean that if the Iowa legislature asks for a waiver from national nutrition standards, as the bill proposes, they'll get it. So this information is as important as ever. And on a slightly different note, there's also been some confusing messaging coming out of the White House and the Department of Agriculture. They recently announced the continuation of a program called the Patrick Leahy Farm to School Grant, which sounds like it's addressing the issues I talk about here, but it's not. We'll include more about it in the show notes. Okay, so that's a lot to digest. So without further ado, here's our replay of school lunch, economic development, and local food. This is the At the Iowa Farm Table podcast, brought to you by the Iowa Food System Coalition. I'm your host, Beth Hoffman. I've reported on food and agriculture a long time, but I've never done a story about school lunch. It seemed, kind of boring, to be honest. A lot of talking heads going on about nutrition and cost and politics. So many politics surround school lunch. And there are gobs of that. The Trump administration and the Iowa legislature are dramatically impacting school lunch as I speak. But I was surprised to learn why that mattered so much. School lunch, I learned, and you will too in this episode, is a major economic driver, a massive lesson in logistics, and a place to celebrate some pretty amazing people.
They have the option of the 3 hot options, and they also have a grab-and-go salad and delis if they would like.
Jessie Sadler is not someone you would call a lunch lady. She's a school chef, crafting tasty and nutritious meals for 2,600 students a day in Urbandale, Iowa. The fruit choices today are kiwis, canned pineapple, and apples.
You'll see at Urbandale a lot of kids crunching apples. They absolutely love fresh apples.
Of course, school lunch should first and foremost be about the kids. The students at Urbandale seem happy with the lunch offered, too.
I enjoy it most of the time, and I feel like it's nice and healthy.
And I like that they have options. The vegetable options and a lot of fruit options, I really like that.
Over the past few years, Sadler has bought more local food. She got the fresh local products through a federal program called the Local Food for Schools, or LFS program.
We were very lucky to be able to apply and get the LFS grant multiple years, and we started with produce at first. We did, the lettuce and the tomatoes, some cucumbers, and then as the grant grew and as we were able to be like, okay, we're more comfortable now with local, then I started incorporating more cheeses, more yogurts, and get a little bit more dairy on top of the produce.
Food hubs were the key to the program. They brought together products grown on small and medium-sized farms in Iowa. The schools ordered the produce, the meat, and the dairy from the hubs, and the hubs handled all the logistics, like storing the food, putting orders together, even delivering it. Julie Udelhoffen is another school lunch wizard who runs food service in Clear Lake, Iowa. She explains that for her district, the program worked really well.
Oh, it was beautiful. You just had to sign up. And then the food hubs made sure that the farmers were signed up. They managed the money and actually tracked it. They did the deliveries. They collected all the foods that we needed. I can't say enough wonderful things about the food hubs because they performed.
Schools are effectively the largest restaurants in the state. They serve hundreds to thousands of kids every day.
That's Chelsea Christ, a farm-to-school manager at Iowa State Extension's Farm, Food, and Enterprise Development team. She explained that the major challenge in getting local farm products into schools is not actually the price.
Cost is not the number one challenge anymore. It's availability, it's connections, it's, getting the right partnerships in place to make it doable.
This surprised me. It turns out that the price of local foods in season is actually comparable to products that come from far away. The problem for the schools is that over the past many decades, a system has developed where schools have to buy through contracts with big distributors and subsidize commodities that come from government agencies. They aren't free to make their own choices about what they buy.
I don't think most people know that schools don't function in a free market economy. They're not just purchasing. They're not making food decisions the same way that we do when we're at the grocery store. They have a whole system set up.
This is a really important point about school lunch. The rules around what schools can buy have excluded local products for many years. And because of this, there was no infrastructure in place in Iowa to get food from farm to school. No refrigerators to store food, no place to put hundreds of pounds of grain, no trucks, no workers available to deliver it.
What LFS did was provide us an opportunity to bring that back. Look at the infrastructure that it takes to provide the trucks, the cold storage, the manpower to be able to pull orders together and get that food moving in all directions, instead of just relying on the one-on-one relationships between a school and a farmer.
That's Teresa Wimmerschlag, a local food systems specialist at Iowa State Extension. She explained that school food directors don't have the time or money to buy from every individual farmer when you're serving hundreds or thousands of meals a day. You need infrastructure in place to move larger amounts of food. But I couldn't help but wonder why. I mean, it's nice to have local fresh food on the table for kids. But at the end of the day, isn't a carrot from Oregon really the same as a carrot from Iowa? Wimmerschlag explained, it's a huge missed economic opportunity for Iowa if we don't take advantage of sourcing at least some of the food from Iowa's smaller farms.
I come at it from an economic development standpoint. Our state agriculture is all about the export market, right? We have to import 80% or more of the food that we eat because so much of what we grow here leaves the state. That's our role in agriculture, and that makes sense. But we also need to recognize that 80% is a lot of food, and the school market is no different. So when a school has a $500,000 budget to serve food to kids, and they're bringing in almost all of that food from out of the state, that means that school money is now leaving the state.
In 2022, Iowans spent $12.6 billion on food and beverages, meaning that more than $10 billion, 80% of it, left the state. Even food grown in Iowa, like field corn and hogs, those products are marketed and sold by multinational companies, and the money again is siphoned out of the state to their corporate offices. Local purchases of food grown on smaller scale farms means a better return on investment for the millions of taxpayer dollars spent on school lunch.
After the LFS round one, I did an initial evaluation report, and that economic calculator told us that for every dollar spent by the LFS program, it generated almost another dollar of economic activity. That school dollar, that property tax dollar that's funding our schools, is now staying in the state and replicating through those communities.
Sounds like what efficiency should look like, right? Tax dollars being spent to feed kids more nutritious food while doubling the return on investment. And having the money stay in rural communities, it really sounds like a no-brainer. But LFS and LFPA, a similar program that supplied food banks and pantries with locally grown food, were recently cut by the Trump administration. Meanwhile, numerous programs still exist to subsidize the rest of the school lunch. So the Iowa Food System Coalition was excited to hear about a bill in the Iowa legislature that sounded like it might help put the focus back on local food, except that it won't. SF 525 seeks to have Iowa set its own nutritional standards with lower whole grain requirements, higher sodium, and a focus on corn, pork, and dairy. How this would impact national funding is anyone's guess. And then these standards would be taught in schools. Chris Schwartz is the executive director of the Iowa Food System Coalition.
This seems to me to be a classic case of what we call greenwashing, or the co-opting of a message or a movement. They are trying to put through this bill that local is going to include the giant hog confinement that is supplying Smithfield or supplying Tyson. That's not local. That's when you ask anybody, you think about what is your idea of local food and supporting local farmers. They're not talking about the big corporate entities that are owned by out-of-state millionaires and billionaires. They're talking about supporting family farms that are truly struggling as they try to provide us with quality food.
I'm not going to lie. This story was a bit of a bummer to produce. There were a lot of things going well for Iowa's school lunch that now, well, we just don't know how it's going to turn out. What it's looking like is if the Trump administration and the Iowa legislature have their way, kids won't get as many vegetables and fruits, and local food will be harder and harder to include in meals. Smaller scale farms in Iowa will again get the short end of the stick. But I also did learn that the amazing people involved in school lunch are very committed to this cause. Teresa Wimmerschlag and Chelsea Christ of Iowa State Extension, and the superheroes serving the food, people like Jesse Sadler and Julie Udelhoffen. They're not going to turn away from this work. Local food just makes nutritional and economic sense for our state and our kids. Jesse Sadler puts it best.
I am passionate about this, about the nutrition education, about trying to, okay, how do I expose these kids to items that they may even never heard of? And to me, sometimes that causes a lot of stress and a lot of the white hairs are coming. And it's like, I got to take it day by day. Sometimes I have to remember it's out of my control, but that's not going to stop me. It's not going to stop me from sourcing local. It's going to hinder our program. And instead of purchasing a lot, I'm going to purchase a little bit, but I'm still going to source it. It's not the farmer's fault. It's not the student's fault. We'll find a way. There's a way.
How can you help? Please visit our show notes and our Substack page for more information on how you can get involved. This is At the Iowa Farm Table. Very special thanks to the Iowa State Extension's Farm, Food, and Enterprise Development Team. Mallory DeVries edited this piece, and Chris Schwartz and Lobo Loco wrote the music. I'm Beth Hoffman with the Iowa Food System Coalition. Thanks for listening.